Imagine this. You just got home from school to play Minecraft. You create your new world, but start seeing weird things happening. You wonder where it's coming from, then you see it. Standing in front of you is a creature. You don't recognize it, and you barely see it. But before you can understand what's happening, the creature disappears. What you just saw was a corrupted mob that was never supposed to exist, but somehow it got into your world. Well, this scenario is exactly what happens on a channel named Omen Concrete. This channel was supposed to be a Let's Play channel with just me uploading videos of me playing in my Minecraft world until it happened. But in order to understand what it is, we have to start from the beginning. The first episode begins with our player starting his new world. Everything seems to be normal. He's collecting wood and crafting tools, and writes about school almost being over. We also see that our player goes by the name Omen. The video cuts, and Omen had made some progress. He has an underground house and is making an iron pickaxe. As he exits his house, he decides to make a dirt pillar, but as he's doing so, we get this strange clip. This clip will be important later in the video, but moving forward, the player starts killing some mobs in a cave before the video cuts again. This time, it's nighttime, and it seems Omen is heading back home after exploring, but he soon realizes that there's something different with his base. There's a bunch of holes on the ground, and judging from our player pausing and looking around indicates he didn't do it. These holes all led far underground, but Omen decides to enter his base, and before the video ends, we get another clip. We hear a horrifying sound of someone screaming from the distance, and this sound we hear doesn't exist in Minecraft. What's even more confusing are these holes in the ground. Omen is in single player, and if he's not the one who made these holes, then who did? Although there isn't much context with it being our first episode, the clip I showed earlier might help us out. If you didn't notice it before, let's go to when our player hears the sound of a pig. As he turns to look at where the sound was coming from, we see it. Standing in the distance is an entity. Judging from the lanky legs and proportions, we can't make this out to be any other mob. Whatever mob this is, we haven't seen anything like it before, and I'm certain that this won't be the last time we see this thing. Episode 2 begins with Omen placing signs on top of cobblestone blocks with a question mark on it. We can assume that under the blocks are all the holes we saw last episode. Omen is probably marking down all the holes he saw. He then types to us.
So I don't understand what's happening. Like I've tried searching this stuff up, but nothing is really answering my questions. I don't play Minecraft all that much, but is this normal?
Omen is aware of his unusual situation. He then heads to a nearby cave where he starts fighting off some mobs. There we can see the holes that we saw on the surface was dug far underground, and Omen decides to jump into the hole to see where it goes. We then get this clip. A long tunnel can be seen, and Omen anxiously enters while picking up leather, rotten flesh, and feathers along the way. Once he reaches a dead end, he decides to turn back around, but while doing so, we see this. Omen blocks his entrance before stopping the video. What did Omen get so scared about? In the video, it seems that something got his attention, but what? Well, it took a while for me to answer that same question before adjusting the brightness. We see the creature again. For just a few frames, we see it walking away, knowing that this tunnel isn't naturally generated, and Omen only found this tunnel by entering the hole that the creature made, means that Omen is currently inside the entity's tunnel. He was probably inches away from the entity just moments ago, and that realization set in after quickly ending the video. But the title is what gets me confused. For Greg. Seems like this video was made as a way to prove something, like he wants to show a friend that there's something wrong with his world. Episode 3 begins with Omen in a multiplayer server. We get introduced to another character named Icrits. Omen wants his help to figure out what's been going on with his world.
Oh, WTF, what is that? That's what I'm asking you. Did you do anything to my computer while you were using it?
Dude, we didn't even go on your computer when I was there. We were outside the whole time.
We can assume Icrits is Greg because he tells him to look for the video with his name in the title. The conversation leads up to nothing, and Greg just telling him it might just be a creeper and then logs off. The only thing I could notice in this episode was Greg's odd behavior. He gets questioned for putting something in Omen's computer, and after denying, he tries to tell Omen it could just be a creeper to possibly keep him off guard. Maybe Greg did mess with his computer, but again, we're only on episode 3, so there's still so much more we need to know, and this conversation only motivates Omen to keep digging. In episode 4, Omen is back in his normal world. He opens his chest to see a book and quill, to which he writes,
I know I'm not crazy. I will find out who you are. But for now, you are D-Base.
Omen has created a name for this creature, D-Base. The video then cuts with our player and his dog. They're walking in a desert as night approaches, but while they're exploring, they come across a glass pillar. Omen takes a closer look and realizes the pillar goes underground, so he digs, until eventually he finds himself in the end portal room. Immediately, we notice two things wrong with this room. There's no silverfish spawner, and there's an end portal with 12 eyes but no portal. But even with all the random oddities, the most unsettling scene in this episode is Omen deciding to take a look around the stronghold. There's something off about this moment. There's no mobs, but our player still loses hunger, so he can't be in peaceful mode. But somehow, he wanders around this empty stronghold until this happens. The video then cuts. As Omen is walking, we can hear footsteps behind him. When he turns around to see no one behind him, he looks around in confusion before another cut happens, where Omen starts heading back to his base. There, he opens up his notebook again, where he writes,
Rip to my dog. Don't even know where he went.
We can assume the scene earlier where we heard footsteps behind Omen was his dog, but when he turned around, his dog vanished, which doesn't make sense. We hear the dog's footsteps, but we don't hear it die or see the death message appear in chat. But we'll have to get back to that in a bit, because right after Omen writes his message, he enters his house and we get this. We have a lot to look over, so let's start from the beginning. Glass pillars. At first I found this clip odd, but never dug too deep into it, until I remembered something. Glass pillars were tall structures that would indicate where a stronghold was located. It also mentions that they were removed in 1.9 pre-release 4 because they were replaced by the Eye of Ender, which doesn't make sense, because when Omen enters the stronghold, we see the Eyes of Enders placed on the end frame. So if these structures were removed because they were replaced by the Eye of Ender, then why do these both exist at the same time? But we did notice that Omen never got the achievement for entering the stronghold, which means he probably took inspiration off the developers using glass pillars to find strongholds and did the same, so he knew where to find them. So problem solved, right? Wrong, because we failed to look over the end portal that has all 12 eyes placed down, but for some reason the portal doesn't open. But we'll get back to that in a later episode, because in the first episode when I showed the clip of Omen hearing the sound of a pig, as he looked around, I completely ignored the pig sound, even though there was no pig to be seen, and the same thing happens in this video when we hear the sound of a chicken. And the only way a chicken can spawn this low in the world is if a baby zombie is riding it, but we don't even hear the sound of a zombie, nor have we seen any mob this entire episode, so that's unlikely. But we have to go back to Omen's dog. It randomly disappears even though we hear the footsteps coming from behind, but there's no way a wolf like that disappears. Something had to have happened behind Omen's back, like his wolf could have gotten kidnapped. When I first saw these holes, it reminded me of an animal, a mole. They like to create holes underground and use it to travel and collect their food. If Omen's wolf did get taken, then where could it have gone? Most likely be in this pit we see in Omen's base. That's also why in episode 2 we see the remains of animal corpse. The feathers come from chickens, the rotten flesh come from zombies, and the leather comes from cows. And you know where Omen was when all of this happened? In the entity's tunnel. But now the entity D-Base has Omen's dog, and Omen is mad, and he's going to do something about it. Quick interruption, I need your help. My friend Afuli is currently moving out of his house because his dad was laid off from his job, and because of that, they can't afford to live where they're at anymore. Anything helps, even if it's just $1. If not, please share the message with a friend. The donation link will be in the description, but now, let's move on to episode 5. Episode 5 begins with Omen staring at his base, more specifically his old base, because he opens his book and quill to write
Goodbye.
before venturing off to make his new base. Immediately, this video gives us a few things to point out, starting with the title, Curiosity Killed the Cat, a phrase used whenever something that shouldn't pique a person's interest happened to pique their interest, basically getting the better of them. And we can see that following with the description.
Why do I have to do this? I don't want to, but I keep coming back to it. Now look where it's got me.
But in order to understand where it exactly got him, we need to continue the video. The rest of the video seems relatively normal. We never see any mobs, even though the entire video always takes place at night. But regardless, as Omen is building his new home, he keeps dozing off, staring into the dark abyss. As he's adding some final touches, he opens up his book and quill, to which he writes,
There's a searching feeling that I can't seem to let it pass. Fear gets the best of me, but this time curiosity might win. Why does it have to be in my house?
Then, moments after, this cycle of staring into the fog is broken when Omen decides to start running until the video cuts. Omen pauses as he sees his old base from the distance. He knows he can't turn back now. He opens the door to see the pit again. He covers it up and checks out his base before leaving for a few seconds. But when he enters the house, the blocks he used to cover the hole was gone, and now Omen is left confused. He breaks the 2 furnaces and chest before we see this. Let's rewind about a minute ago. At 5:45, when Omen patches the hole, not a single cut happens. But when he enters back into the base, for some reason the patched hole is gone. And I know this has some correlation with D-Base. Before Omen jumped into the hole, he breaks the furnaces and chest, and this detail can't be ignored. There's something different from the items we see now than we do from a minute ago. And I want to know if you can spot what I'm talking about. If you still didn't see it, check this out. In this furnace, there's 4 mutton chops. The other one, there's 3 pork chops. And in this chest, there's 4 bread, 5 rotten flesh, and 2 pork chops. All those items disappear, but every other item seems to be there. But what do these items have in common? They're all foods you can consume. But why would this mean D-Base is the reason for these items disappearing? Well, we know from episode 2 when Omen encountered the tunnel, the remains of animals and mobs were still left there. D-Base has a history of wanting food. It's constantly hungry, and it's why it took Omen's dog, which means D-Base is responsible for the patch and food being gone. I'm certain when Omen saw the hole gone, he realized D-Base was still here, and he broke the furnaces and chest to confirm that theory. Once he saw the food was missing, he knew for sure D-Base was down there. When he leaps into the pit, there's one more thing we notice right before the video cuts. We can see this isn't just a 2x2 hole. There's more dug out, likely a tunnel of some sort. Whatever it is, Omen knows he can't go back. And my goodness, is episode 6 truly terrifying. After Omen fell into the pit last episode, he respawns at the bottom of the world. In chat, it says, your home bed was missing or obstructed, which doesn't make sense. Last episode, we see him place his bed down and set his spawn, and at no point in the video does he ever break it. So who is responsible for breaking his bed? We'll have to get back to that later. Omen collects all of his loot that he drops, and before exploring, he takes one last look at the pit he fell into, making sure he really wants to do this. this? And his answer is clear once he turns his back to start exploring this place. Immediately we notice these items on the ground that seem to resemble the items we saw in episode 2, the remains of dead animals. But unlike episode 2, we realize this place isn't just a straightforward tunnel, it's a maze. As Omen collects all of the animals' remains, he finds himself lost in the maze, and the courage he once had quickly turns into fear.
I'm scared. I don't want to do this anymore.
Some time passes as Omen is exploring the maze, but as Omen opens his book and quill again, we get this. In the far distance is the entity D-Base. He's spying on Omen, but his intentions are unclear. D-Base could have struck by now and turned Omen into every other mob in this place, but for some reason, Omen still wanders around the maze. Omen starts retracing his steps. We can tell with this coal ore that Omen is back at where he started, but this time the hole he fell from is blocked. D-Base has him right where he wants him, and all that's left is to attack. But instead, at 2 minutes and 56 seconds into the video, we get this. Omen panics. He's quickly running. He keeps shaking and turning back, blocking himself as he's trying to find his way out. Eventually, he finds a tunnel that he quickly runs into without a second thought. He's blocking himself off and goes into the corner, and then the screen goes black. With everything that went down, I want to go over the craziest parts. The clearest shot we get of D-Base. Their face resembles the Steve face, including the colors of the shirts and pants also matching. We also see its mutated body parts pretty much everywhere, from his face to his legs. It's obvious this thing wasn't supposed to exist. Their glitching feed also shows this mob was never finished. Not only that, but there's a possibility that something might have went wrong when this mob was being developed. It's truly something I've never seen before. But moving on from that, I want you guys to take this video into perspective as the entity. It's an odd theory, but what if someone broke into your home without your permission and started checking it out? Would you not be upset? Maybe we need to understand that D-Base just wants to be left alone. In episode 2, when Omen was wandering around D-Base's home, maybe he felt that he needed to leave and make a new one, like the one we see here. But this theory still opens up a lot of questions, so we'll have to finish the rest of the episode. But moving forward, from the bed being broken to the blocks being placed, it seems that D-Base trapped Omen to turn him into the remains of the mobs that we see on the floor. But in some miracle, he escaped, and it's very clear that Omen is terrified of D-Base. From being confident and angry to scared and regretful, especially with the video title reading, "I regret everything," and the description being a long repeat of saying, "I'm sorry." As terrified as Omen is, it seems that this emotion will quickly turn into anger once again. Episode 7 brings us back to Omen's multiplayer server. Greg joins, but this time Omen is not happy.
This is not funny.
What are you talking about?
You know what I'm talking about. It keeps happening.
What, the thing we talked about a few weeks ago?
Yes, I want you to admit that you did something to my computer.
I told you I didn't do anything to your stupid computer. I'm tired of you accusing me of stuff I didn't even do. This isn't the first time doing something like this.
Fine then. Don't come by my house anymore if you're going to keep doing stuff like this.
Greg leaves without a second thought. The video then cuts to Omen starting a new world, naming it The Truth. Keep this name in mind as I show you the rest of episode 7. He spawns in a forest, collects wood, then writes to us.
I know Greg is lying, and I'm gonna prove it. Just watch.
He's gathering stone and making tools, but then the video cuts. The next few minutes are spent with Omen making himself what seems to be a base. I then started to notice that what he's building seems awfully familiar to his old base. It's a bit odd, but maybe that's the only type of house he knows how to make. But then he starts collecting dirt and building a pillar. Now it's obvious that he's building a replica of his old base with his underground house and dirt dirt pillar. But where exactly is he going with this? After some time, he heads outside, seeing that it's nighttime, and writes,
Just what I thought.
But then moments after, he sees a zombie. For some reason, he's in complete confusion. He then puts some items in his chest before leaving his house and climbing a nearby tree to put himself in a box before the video cuts. But when he returns, he goes to his base, and as he stands by his door anxiously opening it, he stands there for a split second confused again. He then writes to us one more message.
It just doesn't make sense.
There's obviously a lot of questions circulating, but to answer them, we have to start from the beginning. The conversation between Omen and Greg gets a bit heated. If we were to believe that Greg truly did put something in Omen's computer, that would explain everything we've seen happen throughout the entire series. In fact, I thought the same way when I first saw the interaction Omen and Greg had, but we now know that this theory is false. Omen's intentions for making the survival world was to prove that Greg was lying, but how exactly? With the underground house design and dirt pillar, Omen wanted to recreate his haunted world, so that if weird stuff were happening in this world, then it would confirm Omen has some type of mod in his computer placed by Greg. But that wasn't the case. After Omen went AFK, he returned to his house expecting a pit when he opened the door, but again, that wasn't the case. He also gets confused when he sees mobs in his world, because in his haunted world, mobs cease to exist. If he could find one weird occurrence in this world that happened in his haunted world, he would know that Greg did something to his computer. But for some reason, that doesn't happen, which means Greg has been telling the truth. He really didn't do anything to his computer. So who is responsible for all the oddities we've seen throughout the series? How did Omen create himself a world where unknown creatures exist, mobs don't spawn, and end portals don't work? In order to answer this question, Omen needs to revisit his corrupted world, and he realizes this. And so, the hunt for D-Base begins. Omen stares at his haunted world, hovering his mouse over it. We can tell after episode 6, Omen took a break from the world, seeing the 2-week gap between both dates, but he musters the courage to join the world. He spawns at the surface. From where we saw him in episode 6, we can imagine he mined all the way to the surface. He stares at the bottom of the staircase before opening his book and quill.
It's been a minute.
The video cuts, and we see him at his new base. We notice a new sign at the entrance.
Don't worry, Doggo. I'll save you.
He then enters a cave to collect some redstone to make himself sticky pistons. We can tell he's collecting a certain set of materials. He makes 2 tripwire hooks, 8 redstone torches, and 2 redstone repeaters. Omen is planning on setting up a contraption, most likely a redstone trap. And if that's the case, we can only imagine who it's for. He heads to his old base, but doesn't enter it. Instead, he finds an area next to it and starts setting up the trap. He's clearing out the area and setting up the redstone. And I realize that he's setting up a flush door trap, but as he finishes up the trap, he throws some food to set the bait before the video cuts. It's nighttime and he's hiding from a distance, waiting for D-Base to notice the bait. He then waits for a few minutes before we see this. Omen waits for a bit before going to check it out. If the trap worked, then D-Base should be under this block, but when he goes to break it, we see the pit goes all the way down to the bottom of the world, compared to a few minutes ago when we saw the hole only went a few blocks down. As Omen checks it out a bit more, we get this. For episode 8, there's not much to analyze here. Omen gathers materials to set up a redstone trap for D-Base. He succeeds, but also fails. And because of this, we can tell D-Base is mad, and Omen will soon see the consequences of his own actions. The video begins with Omen exiting a cave, but before doing so, he writes,
They say there's light at the end of every tunnel.
The setting looks oddly familiar. He's in a forest, but we can tell trees are burned down until he notices something in the corner of his screen. He takes a closer look, and we can tell from the signs that this was Omen's house. He pauses every now and then, assuming he's trying to process everything that's happening. Before the video cuts, he opens his notebook to write.
So what's wrong with my tunnel?
What we're seeing is D-Base striking against Omen Omen for trapping him. D-Base burned down the area, including his house, as a way of insult. It adds salt to the wound as Omen questions what's wrong with his tunnel, insinuating that a bad situation will end soon or result in something good. And it seems to be the case, because after the video cuts, we see Omen low on hunger walking until we hear this. What we heard was a wolf's howl. If I were to guess, I'd say we are hearing Omen's dog that got kidnapped, and this realization sets Omen off. The video cuts, and as Omen is pleading for food in chat, this time he enters the message in chat rather than closing out the message like we normally see. Almost like he's asking for help. From being taunted hearing his lost dog, seeing his house burn down, and noticing his 12 TNT and flint and steel in his hot bar, things are about to get messy.
I hate you, Debase. You took over every house I make. You made me lose my best friend. I hate you. You wanna mess with people's stuff. Wanna steal people's pets. Wanna ruin people's friendships. Fine.
And for the first time ever, we notice text on screen.
Maybe there isn't something wrong with my tunnel. Maybe. I just haven't reached the end of it yet.
Before setting off the TNT, Omen hears a sound and sees cooked steak at the door. His plead for food was heard, but by who? D-Base. Omen writes thank you in chat, but doesn't send it because he knows it was given to him by D-Base. But again, why? Maybe D-Base knew if he gave him food, it would stop him from blowing up his home. But again, we've seen how quickly D-Base switches homes. Maybe D-Base is apologizing to Omen. Regardless, we can tell Omen closing out his thank you shows he's not ready to accept it, but this gives him hope. And with that, he remembers what he said earlier about losing his best friend. Omen realizes that Greg deserves an apology. Greg joins the world. This time, instead of running around, they decide to play the game. Greg asks him why he wanted him to get on, and this is how the conversation goes.
Just wanted to talk if that's fine. Sure. Wanted to apologize for accusing you of doing something you didn't do.
It's alright, I got over it.
But still, even with that, if you didn't do it, then I don't know why that thing exists. I've been keeping track of the entity. I've managed to pull up a few screenshots of the entity. There was also a time I got really close up to it that was terrifying.
Omen continues talking about the situation a bit more before Greg finally says something.
Why does it bother you so much?
Omen pauses, not really knowing how to respond.
I guess I don't really know.
I remember I used to be scared of a lot of things, but then I realized that you're not the only one scared. Sometimes, you just gotta open your eyes.
Then Greg says he forgives him, but he has to go, and the video ends. This message right here is the breaking point for all of this. This story was viewed from the perspective of Omen and Omen only. A scared kid that was terrified of this creature. But like Greg said, sometimes you just gotta open your eyes. This whole time, D-Base was just as scared as Omen was to D-Base. That's why we never saw D-Base physically interact with Omen and vice versa. They were both scared of each other. D-Base never wanted to do this. It never wanted to harm Omen, and it never wanted to cause so much chaos. I think this all started from a misunderstanding that broke out to be this rivalry between two characters. With the understanding of the relationship, there's just one more question to this story that will answer everything. Why does D-Base exist? One question left with one video remaining, and we better hope this video answers it. Omen is playing on window mode. He opens his book and quill to write.
I was wrong.
He closes his book and makes his way to the house. As he stares into the pit one last time, he opens his book and quill, but instead he goes to sign it and throws it into the pit. We then see a dog teleport to Omen's location, clicks on it and realizes it's his kidnapped dog. Turns around to see the outside, seeing that the dark and gloomy weather had cleared up and now it's bright and sunny out. He looks at the sun, then opens his notepad.
That's easy to base.
As he closes the notepad, we see a new message appear in chat. There's no name attached to the message, but it says, thank you. And as Omen closes Minecraft, it reveals a file behind it named Survival World 1, the same name of Omen's corrupted world. He drags the file to the recycle bin, and the video ends. Let's depict Omen's message one last time. This was never meant to happen, but I abused it anyways. The word "this" could mean the survival world in general. Maybe the world could have been a fluke, a corruption in the system, a world that was never supposed to exist. But he went ahead and used it for his own pleasure. This would explain all the oddities that have ever occurred. It all exists because this world was an accident, a world that was not supposed to be released to the public. What really piqued my interest was an entity having gratitude. We know D-Base is always hungry, always scavenging for food, and always wanting to eat, but he still shows Omen empathy, giving him food when he was pleading for his life, and giving his dog back when he knows he didn't have to. D-Base is different from every other coded mob. Omen realizes from the beginning he wasn't supposed to be here. This world was an accident, and most importantly, D-Base wasn't supposed to exist. Realizing that, he goes to delete the world file, marking the end of his journey, but more importantly, marking the end of a corrupted mob that was never supposed to exist.